of the thin kasha that was never warm enough, of jerking awake like an animal, night after night, disturbed by the faintest noise, his hair already frozen to the roughness of the filled sacking that served as a pillow, his ear instantly tuned to the howl of a wolf beyond the tree line. Everything happened very slowly in the Gulag, he told himself. But even last year's news, the knowledge that something out there in the real world had happened and been recorded, kept him sane. First, you invent a story, then you see it into print, and then, if you're very, very lucky, you get to smoke it. One of the Vori, the oldest, had abandoned the card game for the brief comforts of his concubine. The Vori called him Zoika. He was young, no more than a boy. He had the body of a ghost, and he occupied the bunk below Nehmann. He offered a range of talents, and in spring, for some reason, his keeper celebrated the melt by auctioning shares in Zoika to anyone with enough tobacco. Now, in the depths of Nehmann's second Siberian winter, there was no sharing, and by the time the Vori had noisily finished and rejoined the card game, Nehmann's cigarette was nothing more than a wet stub. He looked at it a moment, then let his hand dangle over the side of the bunk. Moments later, the stub had gone. "Guten Appetit," he murmured. The little waif would eat anything. Nehmann's war had come to an abrupt end in Stalingrad almost exactly 2 years ago. With the city in ruins and the Russians accepting the surrender of General Paulus' Sixth Army, 91,000 German troops stumbled into captivity. One of them, taken prisoner in a church, was Werner Nehmann. Technically, he wasn't a soldier at all, but a journalist working for Joseph Goebbels' Ministry of Propaganda. This distinction was lost on the Soviet arresting officer who handed him over to an NKVD apparatchik, who took one look at Nehmann's stolen greatcoat and his Russian leather boots, and promptly assigned him to one of the work parties digging out foundations for a primitive war memorial. This was to be raised on one of the cliffs overlooking the still smoking deathscape that had once been Stalin's city beside the Volga, and in this respect, as in so many others, Nehmann was lucky. He'd suffered no wounds. Neither had he succumbed to frostbite or dysentery or the multiple outbreaks of typhoid that had crept into dugout after dugout as the German advance stalled. On the contrary, thanks to his comrade in arms, a gruff Abwehr spy hunter called Wilhelm Schultz, he'd been generously fed and watered, a blessing that earned him murderous looks from the endless lines of ravenous prisoners he passed at dawn every morning as his work party, bent against the driving snow, struggled up the bluff towards the memorial site. By the time the excavations were done, it was early spring. Nehmann's last glimpse of Stalingrad was late in the afternoon of a cold, grey day. He stood briefly in the last of the daylight, the sweat cooling under his tunic, awaiting orders from the piratical Kazakhs who served as escorts. The city lay beneath him, as pale and still as a corpse, not a hint of movement, and he remembered lifting his head in time to catch a single shaft of sunlight on the far horizon where the city gave way to the interminable steppe. He was looking west. Berlin was thousands of kilometers away. Should he give the Kazakhs the slip? Should he start walking? Might there be an alternative to sleeping on the bare earth surrounded by coils of barbed wire, aware that his luck was fast running out? The answer was no. Next morning, along with hundreds of other prisoners, the Kazakhs shipped him across the river, marched him to the railhead, and threw him into a cattle wagon. For the next 8 days it was standing room only. The prisoners huddled together for warmth, pissing through gaps in the planked floor as more of the steppe rolled slowly past. The journalist in Nehmann wanted to find out about these broken bodies. He asked questions the way most men drew breath. His curiosity was instinctive, ungoverned, insatiable. Where had they come from? What did they make of the last 3 months? What next for the Führer's all-conquering armies? But these whispered inquiries, however deftly he dressed them up, fell on